Hello chess friends and welcome to the Chess channel, and welcome to a very special game that I decided to show you today on my YouTube chess channel. It's a gameplay by the former world champion Garry Kasparov against the legendary Viktor Korchnoi back from 2001. In 2000, of course, Garry Kasparov lost his world championship title against Vladimir Kramnik. Viktor Korchnoi, on the other hand, in 2001, he didn't play, of course, his best chess, but still, Viktor Korchnoi is a legend of the sport. Viktor Korchnoi is really a grandmaster that we should respect and also, of course, study his game. So this game is really special because yesterday we have covered this gameplay by Stockfish against AlphaZero in the so-called Alekhine-Chatard Attack, and I really didn't know that this is the name of this opening that we have covered yesterday. One of my viewers introduced this line to me, and I wanted to thank him also through this video because I really didn't know so much about this opening line. I think it's a great and aggressive method how to beat the French defense, so I've studied more. I've searched for some great games in this so-called Alekhine-Chatard Attack, and I found really a great one. This game is really incredible because you'll see now an immortal KINGHUNT by the legendary beast from Baku, by the legendary Garry Kasparov. So let's check out now the game. In order to beat the French defense, I think you can use this method. It's a really aggressive approach. Yesterday's game, please also check it out. It was the game Stockfish against AlphaZero. It meets with the similar ideas. In that game also Stockfish played an outstanding performance against AlphaZero's French defense. So let's check out now the game. We have e4 played by Garry Kasparov, e6 the French, d4, we have d5, knight to c3, and now when black goes into the classical variation, we're going now into the so-called burn variation. And as I said, we have now this two series. I've covered this French defense series. You can really study the French also from black's but also from white perspective, and we'll add also this game, I think, into this best chess games of all time series. After the move bishop to g5, here bishop to e7, and now comes this aggressive method of this Alekhine-Chatard Attack with the move e5, knight to d7, and now we're playing the move h4. And this move really surprised me yesterday when I saw it. I saw this moves many times in chess games, but I didn't recognize it as such a good attack. Here in the game, after the move h4, Viktor Korchnoi plays now bishop to g5, after h6 g5, queen to g5. Now Garry Kasparov goes into a different line in the game between Stockfish against AlphaZero that we have covered. Here Stockfish played the move knight to h3, after queen to e7, queen to g4, then g6 has been played, knight to g5, and then queenside castling, which was also, I think, a really cool setup. But here Garry Kasparov goes into the second best line that's suggested by the engine. He goes simply queen to d3. Garry Kasparov wants to play now knight to f3 and then queenside castling, still with opportunities to develop here the light square bishop. Again, we have the so-called block pawn structure, so as a compensation for the pawn that Garry Kasparov has lost, again we have this h-file attack, but also I think a better activity here of white is that's something that we should notice, and always you should notice that in the French defense, when we trade off the darker bishops, black is many times left with this bad bishop situation on c8. So the bad bishop on c8 is many times in the French really a long-term problem. So here after the move queen to d3, here Viktor Korchnoi plays the move knight to c6. The engine suggests here the move h6. You see now the importance of the move because now after potential knight to f3, we could actually go something like queen to e7 and maybe attack simply g5 in long terms, not immediately, because there are some tactics of knight to g5 maybe possible if the queen moves somewhere, then knight to g5. But I think black has solved all of the positional problems, and now after potential a6, a c5 would be possible, and that would be an equal game for both sides. But in the game, Viktor Korchnoi plays the move knight to c6, and this move is already evaluated as inaccuracy by the engine. You see now the problems of this move because Garry Kasparov plays now a very aggressive line, knight to f3, queen to g6, and it seems so that Viktor Korchnoi has solved now all of the positional problems. He can trade off the queens and can go into a favorable endgame where he has an extra pawn. But that's actually what Garry Kasparov wanted to happen, because after the move queen takes g6, you cannot take with the h pawn. You would love to do that, then you would have a compact position, your pawn structure wouldn't be so messed up, but you have to take with the f pawn, and still this h7 is a long-term weakness. Now we have a new weakness. It's also the weak e6 pawn. We have also the c7 as a weakness, so it's a much better position already for white, although down a pawn. So you see how this piece activity can be really a great compensation for a piece, maybe sometimes even for a pawn, or maybe 2 pawns, 3 pawns. The material, we shouldn't always evaluate, I don't know, rook is worth 5 points, the queen is worth, I don't know, 9 points, the knight is worth 3 points. When a piece is inactive, when the piece is not playing, then it's worth 0. So that's why you see now how Garry Kasparov will activate his pieces. Garry goes knight to b5, attacks the c7. If you try king to d8, the problem is knight to g5 will happen, and now you're vulnerable to some attacks. Knight to f7, knight to h7, knight to e6 is also an opportunity. So it's again a bad game here for black. So in the game, king to e7 was played by Korchnoi. We have knight takes c7 by Kasparov, rook to b8, and now knight to b5, knight to b6, and now we have c3, we have bishop to d7, and now bishop to d3. Garry Kasparov develops now all of his minor pieces. We have knight to a5. What Viktor Korchnoi is trying to do is, of course, to have a very nice outpost here on c4. Then if b3 happens, then we could be vulnerable here to some c-file attacks. The knight maybe could be kicked away to a3, and then the c3 would be a long-term weakness. So that's why Garry Kasparov prevents this idea immediately with the move b3. And now if rook to c8 happens, still we can play even king to d2, I think, in this position in order to protect our pawn on c3. Then maybe try some h-file attacks, rook to h4, rook to h1. Also knight to g5 is a great opportunity. If something moves here, then of course this pawn is hanging, then also this pawn is hanging. So again, white has a much better position. So in the game, bishop to b5, bishop takes b5, we have now h6, and now knight to h4. Here really the fun starts. And after move knight to h4, here Viktor Korchnoi tries this move, rook to c8. We have now rook to h3. Many of us, I think, would play simply the move king to d2, but not Garry Kasparov. He played really an aggressive way here, because when you get attacked, one of the best ways is simply to get this principle of the best activity of your pieces. So now after move rook to h3, not that this move is only protecting the pawn on c3, it also activates the rook. The rook can come maybe here on the g file, and now comes really the critical moment of the game. Here Viktor Korchnoi plays the move g5, and this move rook to h3 you have to consider, because if you play knight to f3 here, then g4 will happen and you lose one of these pieces. So these calculations by Garry Kasparov were already here when he played rook to h3. He already saw something, and it's really wild what he saw. After the move rook to h3, we have now g5, and after the move knight to g6, look at this. Where is this knight going? It seems so that the knight will get trapped, because now the king can attack here the knight, and you don't have good squares. The f4, the h4 is taken. You don't have also the f8 square. When the king attacks the knight, it's basically game over. But what Garry Kasparov has prepared here is really wild. Here king to f7 was played, and now Garry plays rook to f3, because after king takes g6, the best way here is simply to play king to g8, but it's still a lost game here for black, because you get the fork on e7. So it's really wild how Garry Kasparov calculated this position. Really great tactics. After move rook to f3, we have now this king hunt. After king to g6, bishop to d3, king to h5, rook to h3, everything is pretty much forced. It's a forced checkmate. King to g4, we have now f3. The only square here for the king is the move king to f4, and now king to f2. You see how important it was to play rook to h3 instead of maybe king to d2. If we would have protected this pawn on d2, then we wouldn't have this king here. So really great move, this rook to h3. Here after move g4, we have now g3, and after this move Viktor Korchnoi resigned, because here after the potential king to g5, f4 would happen, and it's a great checkmate with the pawn. So really beautiful attack. Let's go back to this critical moment. So as said, here it seems so okay, maybe Viktor Korchnoi can protect this position, he can hang on to this position. Here he tried attack against this weak c3 pawn, but now Garry activates rook to h3. That's really the greatness of Garry, I think. We have now g5, and he already saw everything, I think, because he wouldn't have played this move rook to h3. After knight to f3, as we said, g4 would be the serious threat. So the whole tactical sequence, he basically saw really wild stuff. Knight to g6, king to f7. Now here Let's see again this beautiful king hunt f3, king to f2, g3, and now f4. Really great game by the beast from Baku. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this attack by Garry Kasparov. Really hope that you enjoyed this game, because this is really a great approach. I'm learning also something here on my YouTube chess channel when I cover some games. So anyway, thank you all for posting me these names of these openings, posting me some games. This was really a wild attack by Garry Kasparov in the so-called Alekhine-Chatard attack. I think this is really a great approach how to beat the French defense. I think you can use it, and we'll add it, as I said, to my French defense series. Here is the playlist of my whole series. Please check it out if you want to know more about the French defense. And here's also the link to my playlist of the best chess games of all times. I think this game deserves really to be on our list, the best chess games of all time series. And if you like this content, you can also of course subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.